So welcome to the fourth and final talk of Reproduction, Parenthood in the Art World. This is a series of talks looking at how parents and some organisations work with artist parents and how they can balance their practice alongside their personal life, but also as well a little bit about how they manage to carve out some time for themselves. So the first speaker we have today is Dyana Gravina, who is an artist, an art producer, curator, activist, birth doula, which is really quite interesting because Alma Rezia on our second talk was really quite interested in that. So I'll be giving her a link to this talk. I think she'll find it quite interesting. So Dyana is a listener as much as an instigator. She thinks collectively and brings people together. Diana's made of her beliefs an international movement for social change in women's rights advocacy. That is women's rights with an X, but I don't actually know how to pronounce that, so apologies. Dyana is the founder and creator of Procreate Project, which is based in London, a visionary pioneering arts organisation supporting contemporary artists who are mothers, which has been for the last 8 years. So I'll hand over to Dyana.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. For today, I thought I would give a little bit of theoretical framework on which lies a little bit the unfolding of all the different practices that I have. Sally, I think you might have heard this or some of it already. So apologies for the repetitions. I think I'll go with it so that Andrea, you have your track record, and that would actually be great for me considering the group that we have today that is manifested. I would like to pose the questions to you after I've done my introduction on thanks, Sally. On what do you think is working and what not in initiating this project and this incubator for thinking and for action towards different systems that can facilitate more representation and opportunities for artists, parents and mothers. Since we kind of all know each other. I don't know, Anna Maria, I'm not sure we met before, and I'm not sure how familiar you are with my work and Procreate Project, but it could be a nice opportunity for us to actually have some thinking together instead of just hearing me talking the whole time. So I'll just start and then I'll pose this question again, and it would be great for us to interact more around some questions and have some thinking together. If that's okay with you, Andrea, it just feels more appropriate for me considering.
Yeah, no, that's fine, yeah.
Okay. So I think it's important for me to start saying who I am beyond my titles. So I am non-binary femme. So I live as a female, reclaiming what female might mean under patriarchal prescript. I'm an immigrant in this country. I've been living in London for the last 9 years. I am a mother of an 8-year-old, a single parent. I think I'm discovering myself a little bit neurodivergent, a lot, which has been some strength for me in the last years, considering the multitude and the diversity of practices that I run. And sometimes it might represent a little bit of challenges, especially when it comes with my academic journey. But so far, I'm embracing it. With this talk, I would like to address the mother, the term of mother, the figure of mother, from conservative views and essentially grow the capacity to reinvent this role under collective care views. The experience of motherhood is haunted still today by the imagery that we associate with it. Again, I tend not to give visual presentations during my talks because I would like people to close their eyes, literally or just conceptually, and look at what they associate with the word mother and motherhood, because me giving a visual presentation would impose my own views and my own understanding and my own choices when it comes especially to visual representation and art that is related to these terms. So I would invite you to see what comes to mind visually, and I leave it with you. For me, this imagery is associated and rooted in capitalistic as well as Christian beliefs, especially from my Italian roots, and the depictions of the sacrificing, abstinent, caste mother and Madonna, as well as casted in patriarchal constructs. Pregnancy is treated many times as an illness and consequently childbirth, and as the alienation of a person's identity. These narratives cast a shadow on an experience that instead could be celebrated and experienced differently from different perspectives. So many feminists, academics, and activists, like Nancy Fraser, just to mention one, have explained that unpaid reproductive labor is an indispensable background condition for the possibility of economic production in a capitalistic society. However, it is crucial, and I constantly remind this and remark this in my work, to reveal how some feminists, and especially Western first-wave feminists in the 19th century, have approached and negatively viewed the social reproductive nature of the mother and housework. And by rejecting it, they have made it into a less pressing issue to include in their demands and theories. So landing in the 21st century today and thinking about how this pandemic, the COVID-19 crisis, has been considered a disaster for feminism, has brought to the public eye the still contemporary division of productive and reproductive labor, and how capitalism still lives at the back of unpaid women's work. I will argue that this is an opportunity for us to use this visibility, this sudden visibility that we had over the media and titles on TV and press, to offer solutions for new models of care and family and kinship. And after decades of theorizations, revolts, and feminist demands, the status of the housewife and the mother, whether permanently resident in the home or juggling jobs in and out of it, remains at the core of the reproductive crisis and subject of divisions, fragmentations of feminist thoughts. What is mother for you, for society, and why is it still confined in binary patriarchal construction of femininity, implying male domination and social power struggles? Why mother, whether queer, single, migrant, and in a global pandemic, is still scarcely at the center of political and economic efforts? So this pandemic evidences the failure of theories that would have found solutions for equality in bringing the man back at home. We all have heard stories of men being in the room, keep doing their job, and women juggling tons of tasks over the pandemic. So this crisis has shown the impossibility of holding reproductive work together with an utopian idea of emancipation into what we consider, or has been considered, a man world, and has emphasized the need for radical revolution of systems addressing the structural biases at the core. So there is the urgency to queer the mother, as well as look into infrastructural solutions that can lift the status of mothering in its broadest manifestations. Beyond the nuclear family, we are called to expand the care network model in which we care for, care about, and care with. So why, despite the evidence, we're still experiencing resistance? In the recently published book that I've read last year, The Care Manifesto, as in many other feminist and psychoanalytical thinking, a strong emphasis is placed on this so-called ambivalence of care, or maternal ambivalence, seen as an impediment for change or hostility towards the subject of care. Maternal ambivalence determines conflicting emotions in the different forms of care, and it triggers anxieties, and it manifests due to the complexity of women's existence as human beings and as mothers. In my perspective, ambivalence is generated by the impossible socio-political conditions, and therefore the lack of radical systems and physical places where the existential complexity can be embraced, or could be embraced and integrated. Pioneering the system should be central to future governmental and feminist actions. So to embrace the revolutionary potential of this time of crisis, we should follow up with pragmatic proposals for models that can generate a substantial change into the way we reorganize productive and reproductive labor, whilst maintaining or reclaiming the practices and skills women have been carrying on for centuries. So with the intent to bridge history, theoretical inputs, and practice, Procreate Project and my work are offering examples of radical models based on commons that could turn the head around the ways we organize and experience care and reproductive labor, together with ways we organize and perceive the integration of paid and unpaid work. So I don't know if we have more people here that have joined in the meantime. I would like to ask you, what's your knowledge of Procreate Project? And if you haven't heard me talking about how I've started, you can just drop a quick answer in the chat, just for me to having an understanding of what's worth resharing today. Sasha, Anna Maria, I don't know, Rezia, I'm not sure if you...
I've just unmuted myself. I hope it's okay. It was very touching to hear you. I have heard of Procreate through Hetty Judah, and when I just heard you, it felt like you're talking about me. And as I said, it's very touching, and I felt the whole response, everything was about me. And that is global. That just proves how the issue and all that issues and everything that you have spoken about is so global, and it doesn't matter about the geography, the background. it is a global matter. So thank you for that. I'm really happy to have heard you. Yeah, that's.
Thank you. Anna Maria, you hear of it for the first time. That's great. That's so exciting. So I've started Procreate Project just briefly. I'll go into a brief story on how everything started 9 years ago. I had just moved to the UK, and I was pregnant with no connections or any friends here. So I found pregnancy an incredibly transformational experience, very positive. Usually, well, we see the pregnant body as a limited one, as a disabled one, or that's the imagery that I had when I got pregnant, and I was incredibly afraid of losing my professional dreams and achievement and my identity. And then when the actual experience of pregnancy gave me, with much surprise, a positive burst and drive of creativity, I needed to ground this kind of unsettling discovery with some research. So I've started online, and I've tried to establish connection and exchange with other artists that might related with this experience, and with specifically this very psychophysical sensation and feeling of increased creativity. And since I've discovered that I wasn't the only person finding this transformation being a total one, and so I've started thinking about how I could increase the visibility of the more positive aspects of pregnancy, specifically at that time. And while journeying through pregnancy, and then I gave birth and I had my child, my understanding of the biases and the structural impossibilities around combining making work and having children kind of increased to the network and the community that was growing, and that has started growing at the time. So I thought that having an arts organization that could create different systems, different models that could be taken for reference to change the way that we make work, we combine and integrate work with our mothering practices, was absolutely essential. I came to the realization that there had been different collectives, groups, feminist projects, but that had collapsed. And then by the time over the last 9 years, it came clear the fact that still this project today, and Lauren, you'll tell me as well, they still receive not enough support, not enough visibility, and therefore there is a collapse and burnout from a lot of people running this organizations, collectives and projects, because it relies again on the unpaid labor of the people leading them. However, I'm really grateful today because I guess I've persisted thanks to the collective that has surrounded me, the artists, the people that have participated, the institutions that decided to believe in this vision. And so today, Procreate Project offers different platforms of support and representation for women and non-binary artists that have caring responsibilities. we have a prize that offers cash prize, solo shows, residencies within one or platform. There is an international conference that was born with the aim to bring together the health sector, midwifery, the art and the academia, and combining it with a program of performances that could talk about the experience of giving birth and pregnancy and postnatal period, and touch also health professional in a different way, in a way that wasn't led by words and academic terms. And so really create kind of an intersectional framework and an interdisciplinary framework where people that surround mothers and parents during this crucial time can really grow their ability to support these people and more inclusively and in a more aware way, an empathic way. And so that was oxytocin. We have online platforms. We have commissioned works. During the pandemic, we have commissioned 10 new works, which has been incredible to see develop and being shown in different galleries and museums internationally over the last 2 years. And then very importantly, we've piloted in 2016 and 17, the Mother House Studios, which is an artist studio model with integrated childcare where the children are welcome into the working space. And we have opened in November the first more long-term home for the Mother House Studios. We are based in Catford, London, and the idea of this model, which relies on affordability and integration and inclusivity, is to be replicated and being given to different communities and people that have the willingness and the desire to take on this model in their own geographies and communities. So it is still today a strong challenge. There is an emotional labor that is not talked about when we run these projects and when we create intersectional feminist movements and projects. We're still not cool. We're still not glamour enough to be considered from many of the people that could make this work much easier for whoever is trying to lead on certain initiatives and change. Doing this work means that at every step of the way, you have to relate to biases, to misogyny, to patriarchal attitudes, and it goes beyond the representation on how people perceive art that talks about these subjects and this experience more broadly. It's about really trying to shift one person at a time, the way that they view women, and the way that they see women in a working position and in a leadership position as well. And I'm talking about from people that might deliver you services, funding. We're talking about people that might come and work with you as builders for construction works for the studios, lawyers. We're talking about councils and people that work in councils. We are even talking about women that work in higher position in art institutions or not art related institutions. We're talking about something that is so ingrained, that takes so much emotional labor and so much personal development work that leads many times for this project to collapse and do not exist anymore. And I think that that's, for me, is one of the reasons why the change in a massive and bigger scale hasn't happened. So I think that today it's important to acknowledge that labor, that emotional labor that is done one person at a time when we are creating collectives, intersectional feminist projects, exhibitions, organizations, and conferences like this one. Yeah. I'm aware of time. I know we started 10 minutes later, so I think this is my 30 minutes. I will be happy to talk about these questions and these challenges with you now or after Rezia's talk. I guess that's me for now.
Thank you very much. I've got a question for now, actually, something that I was wondering about with the Mother House. If you have a space where children can be looked after, I think you share the childcare, is that correct? So it's different artists help?
So there are two separated but interconnected spaces. One is dedicated to children and play, and the other is dedicated to art making, and so for the artists to work in. There is a person that is a facilitator that is primarily responsible of creating activities and an inspiring environment for the children in the children's space, and that once the children decide that they want to go to the working space, they are free and independent to do so if they have the age and the ability to do that. And so then the domain goes to the artists. They usually takes a time, can be very different from every child, and it might vary depending on the stage that they're in, of settling in, so that they understand that it's a new place. Because it's not just us being used to operate in a certain way, the kids are also used to operate in a certain way, and so they might have that intuition or a sensation that the parents are completely living. And so there is a settling in period while they understand where the desk of their parent is, where they're working, what they're working on. So I always encourage the artists to take the time to invest, spending time in the children's space, and then show the child the trajectory from the place of play to their desk, showing them what they're making, really making them part of it and aware of it, not necessarily like practically part of it, but like aware of what's happening. And so that kind of returns and gives you back in terms of like settling into this new way of coexisting in a space and co-working in a space. So yeah, we have a dedicated person that helps, but I call it integrated childcare support. Is an additional support, and the environment creates support in itself and is not an element to be underestimated. The environment that we create, the collective around, but also the environment that we create specifically in the children's space, is an element of support together with the person and their presence in that space. So there is a co-responsibility there.
I think it's really interesting. I've not heard of a setup like that before. I think for me, for when I've heard of integrated childcare, it's mostly been that artists in a space may take it in turns to look after all of the children for a day and then share it around. And then, of course, that sort of raises other issues of how do you, essentially, you're helping raise somebody else's child, where this is obviously, that's very different to what you're doing. And it's great that the child can see their parent at work in a very positive way. So yeah, that's really interesting. So thank you.
Yeah, it's a model that gathers a lot of doubts and resistance at first. And it takes time to adapt to a new rhythm and a new way of sharing and living a space, a working space. But it has also demonstrated with, I don't know, I think I worked by now with at least 100 artists from between the pilots and the space that we currently run. And I would say that the 90 or 95% of the artists have found incredible support and inspiration, and then have gone to either go back into the making of work that had been stopped for at least 2-3 years, or to develop that practice in a way that will then have happened in the kitchen table. So, and I don't know, I've seen kids developing in that space in ways that it has been so inspiring and heartwarming, and definitely in a way that has kept me going all these years. And then I'm still witnessing the change, the shift in the artists, in the practices, in the children, and it's beautiful to see. It's not the only solution. It might not work for everybody, but at least we're trying to create something that might work for a lot of people, especially when it comes to accessibility, financial accessibility as well. So yeah. Does this model include homeschooling and cohabiting? Does it include mostly toddlers and preschoolers? So this model could work for homeschooling and older children if the premises allow that. So within my thinking and vision, especially because since I started, I actually don't need studios anymore because my child, we flexi school, but is still some days in school. So it's for other people to experience it now, not very much for me in first person, but because of it, I've started thinking about integrating homeschooling into this idea of artist studios with integrated education or integrated childcare. And what I found, because we tested it in Stroud, so outside London, we found that the premises and the space that you have will impact your ability to create an additional space and activities for all their children. So at some point, we have seen a building that was like a whole pub. It was very big. It was beautiful, split in 2 floors. That was like, and it was in a park. I was like, oh, this is amazing. So we can have homeschooling activities at the top floor, the studios with the smaller kids space, dedicated space on the ground floor, and then there is the park for everybody, and it was going to be amazing. Because I was trying to look for a solution for myself as well, because I didn't want to send my son to school, and private or alternative education is just so expensive, so I couldn't afford it. So it could work, just to answer your question, Anna Maria, it could work if you have enough space for them, because in Stroud, the older kids needed fields, they needed space to express, to run, and it did work sometimes because we kind of tried to engage them in organizing activities with smaller children, and I think it's beautiful, the interactions across ages. I think it's really enriching for them. But yeah, you need bigger places to make it work.
Excellent. Well, I shall we'll move on to Rezia, who will be sharing Dancing in the Womb, which is a series of poetic woven expressions inspired by her pregnancies and motherhood. She designed a warp when pregnant with her first child, but didn't make it on the loom as other projects and teaching and workshops and tuitions and life, I think, kind of took over. So in lockdown in March 2020, you got the opportunity to come back to this work with an AM bursary, and you're now compiling a book which will be published in July of this year. And you're exhibiting a solo show at Whitechurch, which is in Silk Mill, the Whitechurch Silk Mill, sorry, in Hampshire, which is from July until September. I'll hand over to you, Rezia.
Hello, hi. So, as it's quite emotional to be talking about a project which is very personal to me, and I hadn't realized all the things that Dyana talked about when I was pregnant, and I feel privileged enough to be able to be participating in this project because for a long time I felt alone. I just wanted to let you know that my background, I'm a weaver, so I feel not only am I a woman, I practice a craft which has been undervalued, weaving, and not very much understood in the global sense of the art world, and yet it has always been seen as restrained and historical, ancient, traditional, and here I am. I'm a contemporary female weaver weaving. So I had a lot of things to juggle with and to prove, and I felt, why am I proving myself? There was a huge amount of appreciation from the craft world, and I was immediately seen as a talented weaver straight after graduation. And for me, to accept that was, in a sense, quite sort of confusing, because I wanted to be seen as contemporary, but our craft world was so very much about the history and the ancient part of the craft that I didn't feel quite like I fitted in. I did have 2 solo shows much before I became a mother, and a lot of attention through my weaving workshops. I wanted to make sure that people understood my craft, and so I did a lot of workshops to show the craft of weaving, the art of weaving, and how there was a lot of prejudice because of the way I look, that I had learnt it in Syria, or my background came before my art. And so again, it just felt like I'm always fighting, and I hadn't realized that I would have to fight as a mother artist until 7 years ago, when I realized that I was invisible to the world of art, curators, journalists, writers, even the Craft Study Centre, who have supported me, the commissions that I received from an Arts Council project, all seemed to just be my background and I have a lot of background, and nothing happened. I was going to talks, but nobody, people saw me pregnant. I was never sort of hiding, or I didn't feel as if it was a burden or an illness. I still had my studio. I was still weaving. I was still making, but things, curators stopped. Nobody came to ask me anything anymore. I was just invisible. And so I decided that I will bring my studio at the back of my garden so that it is easy for me to get to. I started doing things again in myself. There I was before, fighting for the craft of weaving, for the art of weaving, and for this sort of technique which is seen as traditional and not contemporary, and how it doesn't really have a voice other than a domestic piece of cloth. I had to now recreate myself as a mother artist and fight my cause again to say, yes, I have babies, and I have 4, and they are an inspiration. They are a strength to me. They are not a burden. And just because I am now a mother, it doesn't mean that I cannot deliver a solo show. I cannot work large scales. So the pandemic was when I realized I have to come out, even though I am not receiving curatorial invitations. I'm not receiving any commissioned work. I'm not being invited to shows. I am invisible, but I have to now do this myself. So this project, which took a back seat because I had forgotten, although, as we know, motherhood and pregnancy is not a burden. There are things, other care is different. You are now with somebody all the time. This being has been growing inside you, has been attached to you, and is always attached with you, to you. So the responsibilities are very different. But your brain doesn't stop working, and your creativity doesn't stop. Juggling all this just was a bit too much, and so I had to leave this in a box, and I almost forgot about it. And during the pandemic, if I may be able to show you a video, I'm just going to bring it up. During the pandemic, I realized that my children are also so creative, and my studio became a museum for them, a gallery, a space that they were able to learn from. And so these are rhythms, and the yarns are what I felt inside me, the colors I felt inside me during my pregnancies. So I am telling the story through weaving and through these yarns. And I'm going to be exhibiting them. There are 6 pieces. I'm just weaving the 6th piece at Richard Six Silk Mill, and I proposed to them myself. There's no funding, there's no budget, it's just myself. I proposed the project to them and they accepted it. And so I have a solo show, my 3rd solo show, and the first and the one and only after motherhood and after a decade of not being visible by the art world.